This should be played at high volume, preferably in a residential area.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is now time!
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah!
I finished these fights.
Give me a hell yeah!
Top Rope Nation.
Learn to love it. It's the best thing going today.
Well, we're back. Episode 194 of Top Rope Nation from a snowy Midwest here. As I am recording this with Justin and Kyle, it is literally a blizzard outside. I can feel a draft coming off my window right in front of me, but we're going to get it done. We've got quite the agenda tonight. My name's Ryan Drosty of comicbook.com, joined by Kyle and Justin. Justin making his return to Top Rope Nation after taking our post-show off on Sunday night following the Royal Rumble. Justin joint, you probably live about a 15-minute drive from me here in town normally, but due to the blizzard, I think it'd probably take me 45 minutes to an hour to get over to your house right now. How are you doing? How are you coping with this weather across town?
It's brutal. My heart is here to do this podcast, but my broken back is outside still shoveling.
I didn't even mess with it today. It's so windy that I figured if I went out there in the morning, it would be like I didn't touch it. So
if I didn't do it today, I get really annoyed when it's driven over on the driveway, and then you have those compacted parts. So I got to get to it before people start driving on it.
Yeah, I hear you. That bugs me too. I'm kind of a perfectionist when it comes to shoveling. Kyle,
I'm curious. I know Kyle has at least watched it. So the real question is, how many times have you watched the Best of APA on the WWE Network?
I have not seen it, though. I was planning on it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
right.
I did. It looked mildly amusing enough.
Kyle, is it snowing out in Ohio?
No, and I'll tell you what, man. 4 years ago, if somebody would have asked me, does it snow in Iowa? My answer would have been like, I guess. I don't know. No clue that it snowed so much.
The frozen tundra, man.
That's what we're known for, snow and potatoes.
Yeah.
My wife handles the snow blowing in our house, so I don't really deal with it. Oh,
really?
No. I'm not surprised. You told us that about mowing one time, a long time ago.
That's the thing, you know. Once again, we redefine those, classic gender roles in the marriage. I, like to keep a very clean home, and she does a lot of the manual labor outside.
Kyle's all about progress, man. Get out there and shovel the driveway.
Kyle told her he wanted the condo. He wanted the condo life. The yard work's yours now.
I did actually say that if we want to peel back behind the curtain when we got all this yards. I was like, hey, you want a lot of yards. Hope you're ready to do a lot of work.
Oh, man. That's great. So, Justin, like I said, you weren't with us on the Royal Rumble post show. I thought we had a really good show. We've gotten some good feedback on that. Derek and Colin were great guests, and we'll definitely have to get both of them back on the show. Justin, real quick, what did you think of the Rumble since you didn't have a chance to grade it live on air following the show on the WWE Network? What would you give it, A through F?
Probably C+. I didn't think it was quite as bad as Kyle thought, but it certainly didn't have the juice that last year's WrestleMania had. And you know what? And I didn't even think about it, but as soon as Kyle said his match of the night was Goldberg and Drew McIntyre, I think he's 100% right.
Oh yeah.
Well, I mean, like we talked about, it was laid out perfectly. I think, despite it being short and, not a lot to it, I thought it was an emotional roller coaster in those few minutes that they had. So I could see the argument.
That was my favorite part of the pod, when all of you guys basically laid it all out and Kyle was just like, oh, what do you know? Emotional investment and the right guy wins.
Kyle's like, smartest man in the room yet again. Yeah. See you later.
Somebody put up a Lenny Poffo graphic.
It's kind of like in our Facebook group earlier today, there was a discussion going. By the way, if you're not in the group, search Top Rope Nation Pro Wrestling Discussion on Facebook. But Kyle, you were very complimentary to me on my 8 Best Royal Rumble pay-per-view columns that I did. And I wanted to say, thank you, Kyle, because when I write those columns, it's like half of what I'm writing is stuff that you've said on the podcast that I'm just like kind of morphing into my own words and pretending to take credit for. So learning every week from Kyle Ross.
That's what the great ones do. They steal.
I won't say steal, but that take on that tag match from the Rumble 91, without listening to you and Liam doing your pod and in the comments that you've made about it on here too before, I don't know that I would have picked out that tidbit about it being the best tag team television match in WWF history up till that point in time. That being the Rockers and the Orient Express. So.
The new Orient Express.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yes. So, yeah, hey, man, I'm always learning from Kyle. We're always happy to have the Wrestling Rain Man on Top Rope Nation.
Yeah, and I hope you're ready to learn tonight, because, boy, did I have a lot to
There we go. Look at that transition. Put you into the host seat.
Wow. I mean, yeah, I started thinking this week, and I never stopped thinking about wrestling. So, yeah, longest notes I think I've ever contributed for a normal show.
Yes, we have a packed agenda tonight. So before we get to it, let's get the formalities out of the way. We got a couple new reviews I'm going to read here on the air here in just a minute. But along those lines, if you are listening to the podcast version of Top Rope Nation, of course, thank you for tuning in. And while you're there on your favorite podcasting platform, please hit 5 stars. Please hit subscribe or follow. Write a written review on Apple Podcasts. It helps us out so much. And if you leave us that written review, if you leave your Twitter or Instagram handle in the review, I'll get a hold of you so I can send you a free Top Rope Nation sticker in the mail. And we did have 2 new reviews on Apple Podcasts recently that I wanted to get to. The first one comes in from Great Britain, and this is from Tiger Rick. And Rick writes, "Greetings from the UK. I stumbled upon Top Rope Nation via Squared Circle Gazette Radio and have become a big fan and a Patreon subscriber. Kyle, Ryan, and Justin offer a balanced view on current and classic wrestling. Their shows are topical and opinions are varied enough to be interesting, but offer no forced drama. Keep up the good work." Thank you, Rick, for the review. Thank you for your support on Patreon. He is one of our most recent supporters on Patreon, and we didn't even have to pay him to leave us that review, so very nice indeed.
Always nice to hear from the other side of the pond, isn't it?
And then we have a yes, it is. And then there you go. The appearance on Liam's pod, Squared Circle Gazette, paid off. We got a new listener, Kyle, from your appearance over there. And thank you, Liam.
I'm always working.
Yes, he is. And the other one comes from Y2 Jenkinson. 5 stars. These guys get it. They talk about actual wrestling. They don't waste time on inside jokes and self-promotion. They are smart. They are not condescending. It's a great listen. Awesome review.
Obviously, he must have listened one of the weeks I wasn't on.
No. Yeah, that's awesome review. It was great to get those. Every time a new review pops up in the feed, get a little excited. So, guys, leave us a review. We would appreciate it. We will read it on the air when you do. And, of course, if you're watching the video version of the podcast here on YouTube.com, make sure to subscribe to the channel and click the thumbs up just below the video. That would help us out a lot as well. And we mentioned Patreon a minute ago. Rick mentioned he's a Patreon supporter. You can find the link to our Patreon page right there in the description of the podcast or below the video here on YouTube. It's patreon.com/Top Rope Nation. We got a lot coming up here in the month of February. We have a new edition of Top Rope Nation Classics coming up where we will be reviewing a classic event from February. It's either going to be WWF main event from February of 88.
Yay!
NWA Chi-Town Rumble from 89. No Way Out 2004. I think those are the 3 on our poll on the Patreon page. So if you are a patron, make sure to vote in the poll. That
make
poll
sure to
ends
vote
next
for
week.
main event 88.
That one is running away with it right now. It's 75% of the vote. It looks like it's probably going to be main event, but we'll see. You have until next week to vote in the poll. If you're not a member on Patreon yet, sign up. You can get your vote in there. There are, 4 different tiers you can sign up to support the show. There's different benefits at each tier. We also have our book club starting up at the end of the month. It's part of our $10 tier. The $5 tier gets you access to Top Rope Nation Classics, but the $10 tier has the Top Rope Nation book club. We'll be looking at Death of WCW by Brian Alvarez over the next couple of months, and that will be part of our monthly Zoom hangouts that we do with the $10 patrons. If you want to hang out with us once a month, drink a couple beers, talk pro wrestling, it's a good time. We did it last month. We'll do it again towards the end of this month, and we'll kind of incorporate our book club with that. So check out the Patreon page for more details on that. And lastly, of course, shout out to the good folks over at BlueWirePods.com for presenting this show.
I just want to say one thing. When you guys see the notes I might drop for that main event show, if we do it, you may actually vote for one of the other options.
Uh-oh.
Because I already started doing it, and I mean, when we're going over Ted DiBiase vignettes week by week, whoa, you guys are going to be begging for mercy.
I think that show's only 3 matches, isn't it?
2, and the third one gets cut off because
really?
they run out of time. Yes.
Okay.
But I mean, the build to the show. Oh,
legendary.
How can you not talk about the entire year of 1987?
Yeah. There you go. How can you not rewatch all of 1987, as I'm sure you have done in recent years, Kyle?
I have.
Love it. I love it. Well, let's talk about 2021 pro wrestling right off the top of the broadcast here, because Wednesday night, everybody's talking about it. New Japan Pro Wrestling invaded AEW Dynamite. We had the appearance of KENTA at the end of the show, opening up the Pandora's box to AEW and NJPW, developing a working relationship. This is something that we have wanted pretty much ever since AEW launched. It was something that we thought we would get early on, since a lot of the big time players in AEW made their names in New Japan Pro Wrestling, but that wasn't to be. It took a while to get here. We had to go through some leadership changes over in New Japan Pro Wrestling to get it there. But with Kenta's appearance, as Dave Meltzer reported today, it's done. It's a done deal. AEW and NJPW do have a working relationship moving forward. Now, it's going to be a little limited right now as the pandemic's going on because travel between the two countries obviously is limited. So you're probably not going to see Okada or an Ibushi or Tanahashi making their way over to AEW until the pandemic is a little bit more under control. But we did have KENTA, and so I guess just to start with that, how shocked were you guys when you saw KENTA appear at the end of that 6-man on Dynamite? Just let me bring you in first. Now, what did you make of the appearance?
Well, first off, it needs to be pointed out. It reminded of something you did once, where it just goes to show what you do as a good wrestling fan and a good wrestling friend. Is that me and Ryan were late to watching Dynamite, and Kyle texted like, "Oh wow, what just happened?" And he's like, "I'm not going to tell you. Watch for yourself." So that was very nice. Yeah, yeah.
Well, you know what? Why I did that? Because stupid me, I'm always on Twitter scrolling while I'm watching these programs, and I had forgotten I had started the show like a minute late, and so all of a sudden, like on my feed, somebody goes, KENTA, all caps. I'm like, what the fuck? And then, I'm like, oh my God, is this going to be KENTA? And to be honest, I mean, something that big, it actually doesn't take away from the moment, because when you are realizing, oh my God, is the forbidden door going to be open right here? And then it is, you're like, this is pretty big time. And it was. I mean, look, later in this broadcast, we are going to talk about some of the issues with WWE and staleness that permeate throughout all of their brands and roster. Working with different groups, if you can pull it off politically, and Lord knows groups tried to pull this off in the 80s against Vince, and it went very poorly. Just look up Pro Wrestling USA, folks. Type that in your Google machine. It did not go well. People backstabbing each other right off the rip. But, the idea, we've already got a fresh matchup next week on the show. I love it. And there were so many things going on in the build to that, but it's great. And yeah, you said it's what we all wanted. I think it's a win-win for both sides. New Japan obviously is trying to increase its foothold in this country because of the pandemic. It has problems. I'm sure it was, not one of their banner years financially, 2020. And, AEW is a good U.S. partner to have. And then for AEW, hey, you get access to that talent, more dream matchups down the line. They don't need them right now. But down the road, it could come in handy.
Yeah. I mean, the possibilities are pretty much literally endless. They can go for years bringing in, different people. Look at how many people or promotions AEW is working with right now.
Yes.
I mean, you got them working with Impact, you got them working with NWA, you got them working with AAA. You got them working with New Japan Pro Wrestling now. You got they have the women's tournament coming up with so many Japanese women's wrestlers. I'm not even sure which promotion in Japan the bulk of those women are coming from, but there's another promotion. And like you said, this is the way wrestling always worked prior to Vince's expansion, right? Like the different territories would work together, and you'd bring in new people to keep fresh matchups. And kind of a preview of what we're going to be talking about later tonight is the staleness in the WWE product, which is where the bulk of Kyle's notes lay tonight, that we're going to get to later. But it's the big problem in WWE is they don't have that. And we've had the same thing, week after week, year after year, it feels like. And this is fresh. This is definitely what we want to see.
I loved just as much, if not more so, the angle that they threw up on YouTube or whatever. I saw it on Twitter with Kenny tracking down Kenta. He's like, "Hey, old friend," and Kenta like tells him to go fuck himself. Mm-hmm. And then Kenny's like, "All right, well, we'll work that out. Don't worry. Him and I worked that out. But we're gonna do a tag match, me and him next week against Jon Moxley and Lance Archer." And you just get so excited for the show next week. It's a kind of excitement that, quite frankly, and people are gonna say, "Oh, you're biased," whatever. You don't get a lot from WWE television.
Yeah.
Are Kenny and Kenta going to get along? What about Moxley and Archer? What's the main event for the Revolution pay-per-view going to be, by the way?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a long time coming. There's a lot of obstacles in the way, but if you have any doubt that the promotions have the working relationship, it was just a little bit ago, actually today, that New Japan World sent out a link. They have footage up on New Japan World from Dynamite. So, that tells you right there what's going down.
For the record, you talk about objectivity. We're all about it here on this podcast. I thought New Japan in recent years, there was a staleness to about it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's getting to be, okay, we've seen these guys wrestle before. And so, I think, again, freedom of movement is very good in this industry, and you love to see it.
Yeah, they're not near as hot as they were even like 3 years ago, and they need an influx of talent just as much as AEW does.
Yeah. Especially if they want to grow in this country.
Yeah, it's been the stories, I think, of what's been lacking. They're always having, the 4 or 5 star matches, abundance of those throughout the year, and this year was no different. But there's a lot of great wrestling in the world today, and there's a lot of wrestling on television here in North America. So if I'm going to watch New Japan Pro Wrestling on the regular, like I did a few years ago, I definitely need those stories to be pulling me in. And that's certainly where they've been lacking, I think, since a lot of those name guys that I was most familiar with left to start AEW. And, when they left, from Meltzer's reporting, basically the feeling from New Japan was that AEW was like small time and wasn't really going to work out. And they didn't really see any reason to work with them. In Meltzer's words, they kind of big timed AEW. At one point, AEW sent the Bucks over there with Chris Harrington, that works in the front office. Brilliant guy, by the way. Started WrestleNomics with Brandon Thurston years ago. Harrington went over there with the Bucks, and they tried to work out an agreement. And again, they kind of big time them. They didn't think they needed to do it. There's also some speculation that like maybe they felt slighted that Tony Khan didn't go over there, and that's why they didn't work out something. The former CEO and president of New Japan, Harold Mage, he's gone now. And Harold Mage, I guess, was one of the big obstacles in putting something together. And once he left, people kind of thought something would eventually happen. Yeah.
Wasn't he really salty about the video that Cody and the Bucks did in Omega, making the announcement during Wrestle Kingdom?
Yeah, it was like outside the Tokyo Dome.
Yeah, mm-hmm. I think that was the word that he was very furious about that, and maybe rightfully so. I don't know, but hey, sometimes you got to put aside your foolish pride, and he was gone, so it was a non-factor. But yeah, very happy about this.
Oh yeah, I'm jacked about it. This is gonna be great. So you could be fantasy booking in your head thinking about it. Also with this, New Japan Pro Wrestling announced their new U.S. television deal today. In parentheses, they've been kind of building this up for the last couple of weeks. And I say in parentheses because it's not or in quotations, I should say. It's not really television. It's the Roku channel. So you'll be able to watch New Japan Pro Wrestling starting next week, weekly on the Roku channel, on the Roku streaming platform. And they announced that earlier today on Thursday. Did you guys have any thoughts on that quick? Were you surprised that it wasn't a bigger network, like they used to be on Access?
No, I mean, from all the word, you could tell it wasn't going to be a big deal. Like, it wasn't going to be, like some major network here in the States. Accessibility really hasn't been my issue in recent months, weeks with New Japan. I think it's just, I like to watch at my own pace. It's always been the case with me at Japanese wrestling. I'm never going to be the biggest New Japan fan. I'm never going to be in the top 1,000 biggest New Japan fans. I'm just not. But I like to watch the high end matches, and I sometimes I kind of have to do my due diligence, find out what those are. But it's good for them. If it gets even 5 more eyeballs, that's 5 more eyeballs.
Yeah, apparently they're going to have like a limited amount of classic content available on demand too through the Roku channel. So, and that would be a good gateway maybe for some people to get the New Japan World app, which hasn't been on Roku. That's been like a big holdup. So that was why it was a little bit surprising to me. They've had a Amazon Fire Stick app for a while, which was actually the entire reason I bought an Amazon Fire Stick app, or Fire Stick, was to get the New Japan World app, and it works great on there. But people have been longing for a Roku app with New Japan World. So here we go, coming kind of full circle. The promotion's going to be on Roku weekly now. So we'll see where that leads. But I guess just closing thoughts here then on what we saw Wednesday night between AEW and NXT. This was actually one of the rare weeks where I watched both shows individually on Wednesday night and got through both of them. I thought AEW was the better show. They won the ratings war pretty big time this week by hundreds of thousands of viewers. It had been a little bit closer in recent weeks, but they widened the gap this week. Outside of that tag team main event, the 6-man with Omega and the Good Brothers taking on Moxley, Pac, and Ray Phoenix, which was a very good main event, and then that led into the KENTA debut. I guess the other most noteworthy thing on the show was the wedding. So, another wrestling wedding. I guess this was legitimately their wedding, though, from what I was reading.
So, what a way to do it, huh?
Yeah. So Penelope Ford and Kip, obviously, with the wedding. What did you guys think of that? If you saw it, were you entertained, Kyle?
I thought it was kind of a low point. I just was not a fan of this angle for a while, to be honest. Yeah. Now, remember the bachelor party that they had teased never happened. Mm-hmm. And while, Miro was talking, I was like, all right, something big is going to happen. And, it was logical storytelling that Orange Cassidy would pop out of the cake and they would get a measure of revenge for what's gone on in the last couple of weeks. But I think with all that build and, you bring Miro over and what people thought maybe he was going to bring to the table, it felt like a letdown. But God bless Kip and Penelope. If that, if they're married now and they're happy, then that's the most important thing, isn't it?
Yeah. I saw on the interweb that Miro wore the same outfit from the wedding on Raw.
Yes.
Years ago.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he did. Yes. Mm-hmm. And he referenced it a little bit. Yeah, too. So, I thought that might have been the low point of the show. I think Britt Baker and Thunder Rosa had pretty easily the best women's match in the history of Dynamite.
Yeah, I would co-sign on that. That was a good match.
That was really, really good. I was buying near falls, which is obviously what you want to do with a match that length. They built it up over weeks. Obviously, it had to be pushed back a few times. It was a big win for Britt Baker. I really enjoyed that a lot. Overall, I thought AEW was the better show. I think the gap was far more significant last week, though. So I was not surprised. I was actually shocked last week when the ratings came in so close because I thought the gap in quality of the show was night and day. I mean, my Twitter feed was like reading NXT its last rites last week. They're like, this show, when, hey, Peacock comes in, just put them back on the streaming surface 1 hour. They're like, this show is bland, it's boring. And I was stunned, after that kind of chatter to see him, come so close to AEW. But I think, AEW kind of promised a big show, the Beach Blast theme, Beach Break theme. And coming off the better show, it was no surprise to me that they widened the gap, because I mean, this Dusty Classic thing is not going to really wow people. Although you put your so-called WrestleMania headliner on the show and it doesn't do anything, that's not great. I know Meltzer had talked about that a couple hours ago on Twitter.
So do you think that's because nobody buys that Edge is actually going to wrestle the NXT champion?
That's part of it.
Yeah. Because I thought it was a cool moment. I mean, it put over Balor and Pete Dunne. Like he thinks of them as equals to what's going on in Raw and SmackDown. I thought the segment was very good.
I did not love that segment.
Really?
That one line that he started out with, it's like, so much of the time around here we focus on the E, but down here you guys focus on the second W. I was like, oh no. I did not like that line at all. I thought that was cheesier than hell, man. And then I don't know, there's just this thing where when a legend is speaking and allegedly putting over the younger talent, I just get this vibe of, the teacher firing up his students for the high school championship sometimes. And it was odd how they weren't looking at him. It was just it bordered on odd and cheesy. I thought the Edge carrying Cross segment was very good.
Yeah, now he was looking at him. Karrion Kross was staring a hole through him.
Yes, he was staring a hole right at him. And that came across as good. It was just, the Edge Balor Dunne thing, I don't know. That I didn't think was that great. But to your question, I do think that a big problem, or not a big problem, but just the reason for that Edge didn't do any sort of ratings moving is no one buys that he's going to take that opportunity to wrestle the NXT champion. And very odd here. The old Vince McMahon doctrine for years, you don't tease things that aren't going to happen. Well, boy, has that doctrine been rewritten here in recent days, because the plan seems to be, him just teasing against everybody. I assume, and Meltzer's reporting that he's going to challenge Reigns at WrestleMania, which I think makes a lot of sense. We talked about that on a Rumble post show, but that's odd, because remember how mad he got when Austin and Lesnar teased a match, and he's like, "I'm not doing. What are you guys doing?" Remember, Meltzer talked on the Broken Skull session, Vince was apparently irate that they were teasing the idea of a match that he had not co-signed.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very odd that now all of a sudden we're teasing things that aren't going to happen.
It's probably easier to get away with when Vince is nowhere to be found.
That's also true. Maybe, yes. Maybe the Triple H doctrine is tease whatever. So, yeah, I do think that, no one buys that Edge is doing it. And here's the thing. Nor should he.
Yeah. I mean, I would like to see some of those matches, not at WrestleMania, but I would love to see him wrestle a Finn Balor, or I'd love to see him wrestle Karrion Kross, and maybe we'll get that on the main roster, not too long. But
I'll save some more NXT thoughts for later in the show, because actually there's some big picture issues that I continue to see with that brand that fit into our big discussion later in the program.
I will say that I liked how he sold that NXT kind of brought his love of wrestling back while he was off. That was a good tie-in.
Yes, of course, reinforcing that Raw and SmackDown will bring no one's passion.
Well, it's how fans have felt for a long time. I guess he's talking the internet audience there. But,
I guess, yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Can I just say one more thing about Dynamite?
Yeah.
I'm gonna be that fan. Just real quick, Moxley needs to turn down the notch a little bit on the selling of the go to sleep.
The way he sat up and then went back down
that was some Dean Ambrose bullshit.
Was he overcompensating for not getting up that much?
It didn't seem like he connected very well, but he slowly fell back and then whipped back up right away. It just didn't. I'm all about the physics of wrestling, and that just didn't match up.
Was this the Dwayne Johnson stunner oversell?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I should force you guys to do is just pick out 10 random battle royals in history and see if they're all booked exactly the same. I feel like every battle royal, it's just especially in the modern era, guys want to get their spots in. We talked about this with the Rumble, right? It's hard to do with that many people in. And it's sort of elimination here, elimination there. And then you get down to that final 6 and it's a reset.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like every battle royal is essentially the same.
Yeah.
I just thought.
All right. Well, let's talk about. So, despite our complaints about, yeah, go ahead.
One more thing. This is one more thing I loved on Dynamite. The post-match interview with the Inner Circle, where MJF deliberately had Jericho go chase after Sammy, so he could talk to the other guys to, get him on his side, and then he had Wardlow close the door, like he acknowledged the camera. That's great stuff.
Yeah,
that's great stuff. That
was good. Yeah, I mean, overall, I thought AEW was pretty solidly a better show this week. I thought NXT, like, they had some good matches, but nothing that really drew me in. I thought that the tag match in the main event with Thatcher and Ciampa versus Cole and Roddy Strong was like, it's a good match, but it's like the typical NXT match. Tons and tons of near falls, people kicking out of Cole's thrust kick, and it's just like, I don't know. It's like I feel like I've seen it a million times. So you're talking about how the Dusty Classic isn't really drawing in people, and no, I kind of felt that way too. It's like, yeah, this is a good match, but I'm not like excited to watch it by any means. So
again, I'll bring this up later, but a lot of the issues that exist on Raw and SmackDown now have permeated to the black and gold brand.
Yes. NXT is definitely in a creative rut right now. Definitely. But WWE is not in a rut as it relates to their business. So we wanted to talk about, we haven't had a chance really to talk about the Peacock situation with the WWE Network. And everyone's kind of talked about it by now, but we want to hit on that a little bit. But we thought what would kind of lead into that is to look at the earnings report that came out today, just a few hours before we went on the air. And, the big headline here is that WWE had their most profitable year in company history. And they also drew in more revenue than they've ever done in company history this year. During a pandemic, just shy of $1 billion in 2020, which is pretty amazing. And like I said, even when you adjust for inflation, this was the most profitable year in WWE history. So I'm kind of blown away by seeing that because, obviously they relied on a different business model this year, notwithstanding all the cuts that they made to stay profitable to their company back in April. But they didn't have the live event merchandise sales, but they've been doing like tons and tons of sales on WWE Shop. Yeah, order live events. They didn't have a live event ticketing. They said on their conference call today that it cost them like 25% more to produce a show at the Thunderdome than it does on tour, which I thought was interesting. So no live ticket sales. They didn't have the Saudi Arabia show to draw in a lot of money here in the fall like they normally would. So I guess if you look at all of that, you think they would have had even more profit if it wasn't for the pandemic. They would have topped $1 billion, brought it in revenue. But even so, they sold a ton of merch through WWEshop.com this year. I think the average sale per person that bought from WWE Shop was something like $56 or something. So, they're still selling a ton of merchandise. The WWE Network subscriptions are right at about 1.5 million. So that hasn't really moved a lot in recent years. They've kind of been up and down between like 1.2 million, 1.6 million, kind of like right in that area. It seems like around WrestleMania time, they'd always, get the bump. But I think the average 1.5 million subscribers, something like that this year. But overall, when you look at WWE, obviously we're going to be criticizing their creative a lot, and we have for good reason, but the company makes money. This company is printing money year after year after year. So if you want the company to change, the business side of it, they don't have any reason to change. Just look at what's going down. They were asked about the television ratings dropping, and they said on the conference call that they don't actually. Yeah, they don't believe that their audience is shrinking. It's just changing. So they have more people viewing through social media channels versus viewing it on linear television.
I'll say, you're not using. I was gonna say you need to use Nick Khan's terminology of linear eyeballs.
Yeah, linear eyeballs is what he said. So. Make of that what you will, but there's you can't spin any other way other than it was a massively successful year for the company. To have record profits during a pandemic is pretty amazing. And television rights fees is the the big thing that boosted their income as well. Yeah, go ahead, Kyle.
Yeah, look, the bottom line is if this company doesn't sell one ticket over the next 5 years, which would be funny. But I think eventually they're going to start selling tickets. they're going to make like billions of dollars. I mean, you really can't evaluate WWE according to the same metrics that we've basically evaluated every other professional wrestling company throughout history, because they have just so much guaranteed money coming in that, it doesn't matter the angle. I'm sure NBC Universal and Fox, they don't want to see like something like totally stupid, but they're giving him this money just assuming, it's going to be a typical WWE angle, whatever that is. Just keep doing what you're doing. And now you can add a $3 billion deal with Peacock. And to me, the WWE, it's becoming more and more, and we'll get into this in the big time discussion, like a daytime soap, where it's just kind of content. And it doesn't really change over the long term, but their goal right now is just content. You just put out as much content as possible. If you're Peacock, obviously you want to inflate your own subscriptions. So here you're migrating these 1.5 million folks over to your platform. It's a win there. For WWE, they're going to, say, I'm sure there's, any just reasonable promotion, some new people will check this out. I don't know how many, but some new people will check out WrestleMania. So they're going to turn around and say, most watched WrestleMania of all time. Mm-hmm. So again, it's that win-win we talked about. Obviously, it's a much grander scale than AEW and New Japan, but it makes sense. But yeah, you can't fault their business. And I think the interesting thing is, because people are going to now, what if these TV things, because everyone's always, these TV stations, they can't keep giving them money. The viewership's dropping. Have you seen this product? And yet they keep getting more and more money up front. I think the next logical step is NBC Universal going to buy the company outright? Meltzer made a pretty good case for that in last week's Observer. And Vince is old, and I think he's going to be 81 when the TV deals are up, he said. And Triple H and Stephanie, eventually, they're going to be old too. I could just see that being the end game here, that eventually, Fox right now is obviously in play and has SmackDown, but, I could see NBC. It's not worth paying all these rights fees and not owning the company if you're NBC Universal. It's going to get to that point.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what happens when that SmackDown contract comes up, for sure. Yeah, it's regardless of what you say about WWE, and we criticize them from a creative standpoint, rightfully so, but you can't criticize their business model. They're making tons of money. I think they're just viewed as kind of this legacy property by the television industry. Obviously, like, they have these diehard fans, this like hardcore base that are always going to keep tuning in, like we see, that are going to keep spending money on the product. And, it's just one of those things that they bring, even if they're less, like, reliable ratings. Like, they're even, look at SmackDown's ratings in the overall viewership, they're almost dead last on network Friday nights, almost always like dead last. But in the 18 to 49 demo, they're always like in the top 3. And that's what advertisers care about. That's how you're making your money. So, they're doing well from that standpoint. So, yeah, I think the Peacock deal for the WWE Network, the $1 billion deal that they made, what was it, last week? If you're a wrestling fan, I don't know how you couldn't be excited about this, because, for the same money that you're paying now to get the network, you're going to get all the NBC content on Peacock as well. Plus, from WWE's perspective, you're going to have all these people that subscribe to Peacock who now have access to the WWE Network, and there's your gateway, right? If you get Peacock already, you're saving money. Justin, does your cable company pay for Peacock for you? I know there's some cable companies that it's included with the plan.
Nope. We do YouTube TV for our cable. Mm-hmm. But I got Peacock to watch the Premier League.
Oh yeah.
In fact, I just watched Tottenham lose to Chelsea, 1-0. I had to text my cousin and say, I apologize for any part I played in making you Tottenham fans.
Well, hey, so for you though, like, you were going to get that anyway, so you're saving money now.
Yeah, I'll be saving $10 a month.
Yeah.
believe it's 1-0 is what they like to say over there.
Yeah, it's just a great deal for WWE because you're going to get the curiosity factor of some lapsed fans who aren't paying for the network, but it's there now within the Peacock app. And, some night they might decide, hey, let me click on that and see what's there. Curiosity factor draws them in, on like one of the old documentaries, like the Yokozuna documentary that just debuted, which is excellent, by the way. If you guys haven't watched that, check that out. But there's like great archival content. Maybe they want to relive something from their childhood. Maybe they want to go back and watch a classic WrestleMania, or maybe they're curious and they watch the current product. I mean, the customer base now for the network is going to be so much bigger than it was when they were running it as their own standalone platform. And then lastly, I think the big thing here, and I'll make a prediction for you, is that I think maybe
spoiler.
Next year. I mean, I think the end game is for WrestleMania to be on network television, like on NBC, like the Super Bowl. And I could see that happening next year. Wow. Think about it. Like you have, whenever they do the Reigns Rock match, that's a huge draw on network television, right? You got Dwayne Johnson coming back to the WWE. Yeah. I think the end game, besides the ownership situation that Kyle mentioned, is the WWE, and I think they've actually said this before, they want WrestleMania to be treated like the Super Bowl, like the NBA Finals.
Yeah, Nick Khan said that. You're right.
They want it on network television, not pay-per-view, not WWE network TV. And I think that's coming, and I think Peacock made this deal with a mind for airing WrestleMania on NBC, maybe in as early as a year from now. We'll see. But yeah, it's very, very, it's exciting to talk about and to think about, I think, as a fan, and certainly for the company.
Look, I think you could criticize WWE for never being able to really get above that 1.5. What was the high point of the network subscriptions, Ryan?
Like 1.8, 1.9,
okay.
Maybe at the highest.
I mean, considering how many people were watching Raw at the time of the network launch, that's not a really impressive high point.
Mm-hmm.
That said, I will say this, and this is something I think people in the wrestling bubble, we talk about that a lot, either don't understand or don't want to acknowledge. I think there's a stigma to having a professional wrestling only streaming service. Yeah. Right? Like, unless if you really like pro wrestling or love pro wrestling, you're probably just not going to get it. And I think here it's kind of like, you're right, with the unlimited growth. I mean, how many people wind up watching this above 1.5 million? It remains to be seen. I don't think it's going to be like this huge number overnight where all of a sudden people, like massive flocks of people say, oh my God, the WWE, I can just watch this now. I don't think that's going to be the case necessarily. But I think it's a smart move for WWE because they were never getting over 1.5 anymore. I think it's a ceiling, and that stigma that exists, it's like, do I just really want this? If you're just a casual person who wants to watch wrestling no more than like a couple hours a week, you may not get the network.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I don't know who that person is that this mythological fan that I'm speaking of that has a stigma, but I think it exists, to be honest with you.
Yeah. It looks like, I just looked it up. This chart was made in 2019, but I don't think it's gone up since then. As of the middle of 2019, their highest subscriptions for a quarter was just shy of 1.8 million, quarter 2 2018. So that would have been to watch the Mania that we all went to.
Yeah, and boy, has the company been in the crapper ever since.
But that quarter 2 2018, they had like 1.799 million subscribers, and that's the highest, at least for a quarter, goes. But the yearly average has always kind of floated around the last couple of years, at least, around that 1.5 ish. I think it was much lower than that in the early days of the network, but then they kind of settled in that area.
I just wanted to throw out there, as of December, Peacock had 26 million subscribers.
So there you go.
He's going to get some extra eyeballs.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, it's a no-brainer.
Go ahead, Kyle.
No. I was just going to say real brief. There's going to be some ad campaign for WrestleMania. I mean, we know they added Fastlane to kind of work the kinks out, make sure the show goes off without a hitch. Like fans are accustomed to seeing on the network for the most part. But, by all accounts, they are going to push WrestleMania on that Peacock network.
Yeah. And I don't know how it's going to work in there, but I mean, I would assume on WrestleMania, the 2 nights WrestleMania is going to be this year, you log into Peacock, it's probably going to be front and center, like the first thing you see. And there are a lot of people that aren't really wrestling fans that will watch WrestleMania. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but back when WrestleMania was on pay-per-view, I would invite people over to my place to watch it who weren't fans anymore. But like, if you told them I'm going to watch WrestleMania, they would watch it. I know I have family members who live in areas where WrestleMania happened. Like one of my cousins used to live in New Orleans, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I went to WrestleMania when it was here, WrestleMania 30." And he's not really a fan, but it's WrestleMania, so he bought a ticket. You know, so if people log into Peacock and they see, "Oh, WrestleMania's on," they're gonna get a lot of curiosity clicks, no doubt about it. So, yeah.
So really, the thing I'm really curious about is how it's going to work in the Peacock. Obviously, at the top of their tab, they have like movies, TV shows, kids, blah, blah, blah. My wish is that you click on just like a WWE logo up there and you basically have the network as we have it now. The one thing that I'm really bummed about is that for like the Sunday pay-per-views, your takeovers and whatnot, because this really irks me about when I watch the Premier League, you can't pause it and you can't rewind. You're watching it live, just like everybody else.
Yeah, Meltzer brought that up. Do you think that they're gonna fix that? Because
that's got to change eventually.
Yeah,
they got to change that. Yeah, I don't know how it's gonna look either. It'll be interesting. I think, you know, my first thought when I first heard about it was like, oh, they better be bringing the classic content with them, and it sounds like that they are, and they're probably working on right now as we speak, moving that over.
Chicago PD can wait. Okay, we need more episodes of 1985 Mid-South.
Don't tell my mother-in-law that.
So yeah, I don't know logistically how it'll look. It'll be interesting to see, but I mean, I don't know how any wrestling fan could be upset about this. You're getting a lot more content for your money. So
I'm pissed.
Kyle's very upset about this.
No, I'm not.
Well, Kyle, you might get upset talking about our next topic. So this is the main event of episode 194 of Top Rope Nation. This is what Kyle messaged us about last night or the night before, and you're like, "Oh, I'm really going on these notes." And Justin was like, "My God, he just sent me War and Peace." So he got all the notes worked up. It has to do with age in WWE. It has to do with the Royal Rumble. I know you got a lot to say, so I'm pretty much just gonna, first of all, just turn over the microphone to you, and we'll kind of chime in when we have thoughts. But go ahead with what you have prepared for the broadcast.
Yeah, so I saw, and I'm sure you guys did as well, lots of talk about age on the old Twitter timeline in the last couple days since the Rumble. Not surprising. You have set up in just the last week or so Goldberg, who's 54, Edge, who's 47, and Sheamus, who's 43, as title challengers. Pretty old, right? But I kind of wanted to drill down a little more and make this specific. Because there was some pushback on this from the age, from the WWE loyalists or whatnot, whatever you want to call them. And I think the issue isn't necessarily age. By the way, I'm calling this discussion "Age Ain't Nothing But a Number." That's how WWE of me is. I believe that was an old TLC album. So
there you go.
Very appropriate that I'm using, old references to talk about a company that relies on old people.
WrestleMania 11 reference?
Yeah, no, I think that was Salt and Pepper. Was that?
Oh, that was Salt and Pepper. You're right.
Who, by the way, has a movie on the Roku channel. I saw. I was in tears. Anyway, I believe the issue is not specifically age, but rather how long some of these people have been on television, specifically WWE television. I'm not just referring to those three aforementioned names. Now, time spent on the roster and age, they do seem to largely go hand in hand, right? If you've been on TV for a while, you're probably old. But, to use a couple examples, Dave Bautista, we just talked about his big rise in Top Rope Nation Classic in 2005 Royal Rumble, didn't we? He was 38 at the time of that match. But he'd only been on the main roster for 2.5 years. Fast forward to today, Damian Priest. I think he's like 38. Mm-hmm. But brand new, obviously. And it goes without saying, by just being called up to Raw, he's a lot fresher than a lot of his younger contemporaries. For example, Seth Rollins, 34, just to pick out a name. So 4 years. So Priest is older, but he's fresher because he just literally was called up, right? And so what do you think about that kind of delineation? Age not necessarily being the biggest thing, but it's, as we're going to get into, you have just so many guys in the WWE right now, and you're bringing more back too, that have just been around for so long.
Yeah. Justin, any thoughts?
No, 100%. I mean, it's brought up, like, I think Kyle actually might have brought it up on the Royal Rumble review podcast, where you think about if in the 2001 Royal Rumble, if it was populated by a bunch of guys who had been in the Royal Rumble from 91.
Yeah, and it's so great you brought that up, because I actually watched that Rumble earlier today. I've been a little under the weather, and so I just started what else am I going to do? Just sitting by myself. I'm going to watch all the wrestling. So I actually watched the 2001 Rumble. I am so glad you mentioned it, because I made a note of this. The Honky Tonk Man was in the 2001 Royal Rumble. This man drew zero reaction. Zero, which I'm sure makes you very happy, Justin Joyce.
Very much.
He was thrown out in he came down, sang a song, and I mean, there were people in the crowd that were like, what is this? And Kane smashed the guitar on his head, throws him out. Now, Hulk Hogan get a 12-minute run in the Rumble and a contract. He'd show up on TV a few weeks. I mean, just for an example, I just think it's very interesting you brought up 2001, because I made a note of that, and I'm like, man, you talk about the use of legends in 2001, you talk about the use of legends in 2021, very different.
And for me, obviously, when you have these guys like Dolph Ziggler, who are always, they're here for over a decade, they're kind of always in that mid-card range. And then they'll try just out of nowhere to try and heat him up for a main event. Like they put him in against Ambrose at SummerSlam a while ago. And it's like, nobody buys that he's going to win this title. I mean, you can't just heat up some, as I've heard the term microwave pushes.
Yeah.
But to me, it goes hand in hand with them not striking when the iron's hot with superstars. And to me, that's just as big of a problem. Is they've had a handful of moments in the past 10 years where a guy is ready to become a superstar and they just refuse to do it. I mean, how many instances are there outside of Drew McIntyre? I mean, Drew is the first time, and even they were borderline on missing that too, because he was, on the verge of languishing, in that mid card.
Yeah, that's a huge problem. Is they don't strike when the iron's hot, and then people think they can come back to them, and they can't. If you miss it at that moment in time, maybe you'll get over a little bit, but not like you would have at the time, right? You can't just heat up anybody out of nowhere and expect to be like you mentioned, Ziggler. They did that challenging McIntyre too. Out of nowhere.
I was going to say that. It's so funny that Justin brought up a 2016 example. Yeah, they did it actually
last summer.
Ago.
Last summer, yeah.
Yeah,
it's no one buys that he's going to win the world title. It's dumb. I think the problem is these people have been kind of running in place for a decade, and there's no excitement.
It used to be when somebody was in a promotion, you could chart their career there with a line graph, right? They come in, slowly builds up. Then it hits the peak.
Brett,
comes down a
tag
little bit.
team champion, intercontinental champion, world champion, right?
Yeah,
Michael's similar thing too.
Yeah, or world title shot. Maybe they don't win it, whatever. And it comes down a little bit. The great ones can course correct. Something happens. Maybe they were a heel that whole time, and then they turn babyface. You course correct, and then eventually goes down. Now, if you're to chart the majority or the vast majority of WWE performers in the modern age, it's almost like it's a circle with a line drawn through it, where it's like main event, mid-card, main event, mid-card, where the line is the delineation point. And look, we talked about them making this ass load of money. I just think the way they do it, and trust me, I've got a lot of stuff to drive this point home. It's the leaning on nostalgia that isn't even really nostalgia. It's one thing to bring Hulk Hogan back at WrestleMania 18, right? His era had come and gone and been replaced by a whole nother thing, the Attitude Era. We're going to, with Edge, has Edge's era ever ended? The era, isn't WWE in 2021 very much the same WWE that Edge was in 15 years ago, 10, 15 years ago? I think that's the thing. And with the mid-card guys, Edge is just kind of, he comes to mind because he's just came back. He's in the main event. But some of these mid-card guys they bring back, it's is this really better than a fresh person like Jeff Hardy? What has Jeff Hardy done in this run since being brought back in 2017? I defy you to name me 5 things Jeff Hardy's done.
I mean, the most memorable storyline maybe he's done is that crap that they did with Sheamus all last summer.
Yeah, okay, there's that.
Yeah.
He had that atrocious match with Jinder Mahal in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
Remember Jinder sold when it didn't hit?
Yeah, it's not been the most
Yeah.
I guess right when he first came back there was a little excitement, but it died quickly.
He was a difference maker in 2007, 2008. I'm just picking out random names, but let's get, I kind of want to get back to this concept of age versus been around. Okay, let's use 2 names that are fresh in people's minds. Edge and Goldberg, okay? Edge is greater than Goldberg right now in the present day, not necessarily because he's younger, he's 7 years younger, or because he's a better worker, even if you think he is, and most people probably think he is. But the key is Edge just came back last year and is off this long injury layoff too, right? Goldberg, he's used sparingly, but he returned to the company in 2016. We kind of talked about this with the McIntyre match. It's like, it's a different formula than you usually see with most WWE matches, but it's a formula that we kind of know what's coming when Goldberg wrestles now, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be 5 minutes, all big moves. There's pros and cons to it, but I mean, Goldberg's been around now for 4.5 years. That's longer than his WCW run.
Yeah.
Feels like 20.
I mean, that's real long. So I think, and we've been talking about this, the issue is you have too many overexposed guys right now who've been on WWE TV for too many years, regardless of their age. And many of them have had babyface and heel runs. And in many instances, you could probably argue they've already hit their height. I love Daniel Bryan. Let's use someone that we all love, right? Is it ever going to really be as good again as it was in 2014?
No. Those are high standards. Not going to happen.
Seth Rollins, native Iowan, he has gotten long-term title runs as both a babyface and a heel. Long runs in both roles. And, I realize there's lots of hours to fill here. So, I mean, I want to be very clear if anyone from WWE is listening to this. I am not advocating a mass firing tomorrow of all of your talent, okay? But there is a clear lack of fresh matchups and performers in this promotion. By the way, what got me thinking about this is when Justin texts us, what would you do with Daniel Bryan at WrestleMania? And the answers, based in reality, seem so dire that my mind just started firing off on all this stuff in all these ways. And
I want to talk real quick about Seth, because something about that is, so it's been 6 years since he won the title at Mania the first time, right? 31. And if you look at, if you take the 80s and the 90s, when it had been 6 years since the guy first won the title, there would kind of be moving into that phase where they're starting to put over the younger talent, right? Look at Hogan, 6 years putting over Warrior. Brett, he didn't even make it that long because it would have been 98, since he had first won the title. So 6 years is a long time historically when you look back at the business and, go from that first title win to now you're bringing in some new guys. So if you just go back to Seth, I feel like he should, even though he's only 34, I mean, he can cruise in that main event scene a little bit longer, but he's starting to get to that point where he should be kind of bringing in the next generation of main eventers.
And I am so glad you said that, Ryan Drosty, because let us turn to this. These lack of fresh matchups and performers is inexcusable, and I don't use that term lightly, given the existence of NXT.
Should be easier than any time in history.
Yes, to have, I mean, every year you should be replenishing your Raw and SmackDown rosters. Did you guys see that graphic that Raw, it was coming soon to Raw? And I think it was from not even 2 years ago. It was Lacey was on it. Heavy Machinery was on it. But there's already 2 guys gone now. EC3 and Lars Sullivan. I mean, obviously, Lars, there were some extenuating circumstances there. But, guys that are, they're just done. As we're going to talk about more, it's getting more and more dire. A couple of years ago, NXT was looking great. You had all these guys. And you're like, oh my God, this guy looks great in NXT. Oh, I can see this guy being a star. And, now that's not really the case because particularly with the men, the hit rate of guys going from NXT to main roster has been nothing short of awful. And that's inconceivable given, again, how good NXT was in 2016, 2017. Look at those takeovers. People were like, oh my God, Andrade, Aleister Black, all these guys that were on top in NXT. Everyone's like, oh my God, you've got so many next future stars. Here's something to choke on. Bobby Roode has been on the main roster for 3 years. I know he is a tag team champion. Someone's going to come at me with, yes, one of the finer tag team championship runs. By the way, he was not in the Rumble and Dolph Ziggler was. Am I correct on that?
Yeah. Yep.
That's odd. You could point to Drew McIntyre again. I know example guy, I saw some people say, old people suck. Here's 42-year-old Ric Flair winning the 92 Rumble. Stop with that. Stop cherry picking random examples. By the way, business was not good in 1992 WWF, so do you know your history? But Drew McIntyre, he had been someone pretty much earmarked for greatness by WWE prior to the existence of NXT, right? Remember, he was 10 years ago. They were like, oh, this guy, Vince McMahon cut a promo in the ring saying this is the next future superstar. He flamed out, but when he was brought back, he was the guy you knew was going to come through the system real quick, and they were going to push. Other than him on the men's side, it's like Braun Strowman, and that's it, man.
Yeah.
I'll drive it home even more, okay? In this year's Rumble, the one that just happened that we did our wonderful post show on, there were only seven guys who made their main roster TV debut in 2017 or later. They are Ali, Nakamura, Ricochet, your boy, Elias, Riddle, don't call me Matt, Otis, and Dominic Mysterio. None of those guys right now seem like they're headed for the top of the card. Only two of them are below 30, Otis and Dominic, and fair is fair. I think we know why Dominic Mysterio is in this company. If he was Dominic, anybody else, he's probably not in the company, right?
Right.
That would leave one sub 30-year-old person in the Rumble, Otis.
Wow.
Who you have had win Money in the Bank and lose it like an idiot.
Wow.
I can't help but think, obviously a big part of the problem is WWE not knowing how to use these guys. It's creative. But also, I can't help but think about Undertaker's comments about this generation being soft, when really it's that they know how to take care of themselves better, to where, you talk about Seth Rollins winning the championship 6 years ago, and, back in the day, he would have been on his way out by now. So these guys take care of themselves so they can stick around for 15, 20 years. And I guess that makes people soft.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought those Undertaker comments up, because what's funny? Whenever somebody from that generation, tries to criticize the current product, and for the record, I think, there are things very much wrong with modern wrestling. Obviously, we're going through them, but it's one of two issues. It's either they don't know how to articulate the problem properly, or more likely they just don't want to run afoul of Vince McMahon. What did Justin just say? It's on the creative. That's the issue. The star-making arm of the promotion's broken, and has been broken for some time. You talk about being soft. No, they don't know. It's the creative doesn't know how to make stars. That's the problem. I just mentioned 7 guys who, have come up in the last 4 years. Nakamura is the only guy who sniffed the main event, and they've they kind of screwed up with him a couple times.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and it's like, we keep hearing about this Big E push, that they're going to push him to the top. And so they give him the Intercontinental title. He held that 6-7 years ago.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, yes, he held it at the 2014 Royal Rumble. I had in my notes, and just to show you, what is that? Time is a flat circle. That expression. Kane eliminated Dolph Ziggler in the 2009 Royal Rumble. He also eliminated Dolph Ziggler in the 2021 Royal Rumble, although Dolph did last 20 minutes longer the second time around. So if you're just somebody who watches these shows year to year, it's amazing how little anything changes. And maybe that's by design. Again, I talk about the soap opera-ization of WWE. Maybe that's the way they want it. And given the financial numbers we ran through earlier, Ryan, you can't say WWE is bad, but by God, it's kind of boring this way. Isn't it just see the same people over and over again? And let me hit you with this number. Half, that's 15, 30 people in the Royal Rumble, of this year's men's entrants made their WWE TV debut at least 10 years prior. Half. At least debuted 2011 or earlier. 11 of those 15 were at least 15 years earlier. 5 of them were at least 20 years earlier. Now, to be fair, there's some cameos and long gaps in there. But if 50% of your Rumble participants have been around that long, and really it's 67% that's been around for 8 years or longer, which, as you mentioned earlier, Ryan, is a long time. Aren't people sitting around at home saying, this guy's still around?
It's even longer now because of the amount of content they have. Mm-hmm. You know, like if
good point.
You're producing 5 hours of television on the main roster a week, let alone the NXT 1 to 2 hours, depending on what era we're talking about, versus, back in the day when we had 1 hour of Raw, every week.
Oh yeah. You need more people. There is no denying you need more people, but with a roster this huge, you should not have the lack of fresh matchups they do. I think we're all in agreement there. I mean, you absolutely want to have a big roster if you've got to produce all these hours of television. But for there to be like so little fresh matchups, it's crazy. And getting back to, some of these people bringing out the Carlitos and the Hurricanes in 2021. Folks, Aleister Black was not in the Royal Rumble Sunday.
Aleister Black hasn't been anywhere for quite a while.
Long time. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, again, like that's a friend. What are they waiting for? The senior prom? I mean, as Bobby Heenan once said, or I think it was Gorilla.
In fact, that is the storyline they're going to bring it back with. Spoiler, no.
Yes,
they're waiting for May.
Yeah. Who knows, man? It's just like I just think that like it goes back to striking when the iron's hot. If you pigeonhole these guys, I mentioned those 7 guys earlier. They've already been pigeonholed as mid-card for life. Yeah. And if you don't hit at the right time, man, they're just all going to be mid-card for life. I just think there's a real running in place mentality with this promotion. Randy Orton, I mean, we haven't even had him. 18 years uninterrupted in the same promotion. That's unprecedented. I don't think there's anybody in the history of wrestling. I mean, they can say Vern Gagne in the AWA, but he owned the joint.
Yeah, well, Taker. But
he
changed characters like completely at one point.
Yes, yeah, that's a good point.
But Orton's heel face, but it's basically been the same character since the post evolution.
Yeah, and when did Undertaker go to like part time? I mean, he'd been part time for at least the last like 7, right? I guess still that'd be longer than Orton has been around. But yeah, I mean it's crazy. It's one thing for the Undertaker's like an iconic person, but is Randy Orton an iconic character? No offense.
I mean, probably not to the degree
to some younger kids. I'm sure he is. But,
in WWE canon, is he? I would love to hear someone who's like, "Oh, this Randy Orton is just God." But I love that he defines 21st century wrestling.
If there was any kids at school that actually watched wrestling, I'd ask them. But the skipped generation, as we like to say.
Yeah. And I just think, like, again, if you're somebody who tuned out 10, 15 years ago and you put it back on and you see a lot of the same people, you're going to probably not be interested. I mean, I guess you could argue familiar faces are, quote, comfort food, and the Legend reunion always does well, right? TV-wise, there's always that artificial bump. But what happens when the week after those Legend reunion shows? What happens to the number? Goes right back down, which shows that, people aren't sticking around. Those people, they'll watch one week, but, not the next. And, I just think lapsed fans don't have a lot of interest in this weekly product and the value that these older names really have. I'd love for somebody to demonstrate that to me because, we talked about Jeff Hardy. I mean, is somebody like, we're like, fuck, man, Jeff Hardy's still around. That's awesome. I mean, does that person exist? Is there somebody who was like really fired up that Jeff Hardy is still around in 2020? I defy you to find me this person. If you're listening to this podcast, please email the show right on the Facebook page.
Probably Mr. Hardy Sr.
Okay, I mean, maybe. But, I know some people are going to point to, what about Sting? He's so old, AEW. People shit on Goldberg, but they're, all cheering on Sting. I think you're missing the point. It's a new promotion and a bunch of people he's never worked with before.
Well, and that's what makes AEW so important. And in a way, their partnership with New Japan is that kind of what has led to all of this staleness was kind of the downfall of WCW. We need wrestling turnover. We need them to have other places to go that have a large platform. I like Ring of Honor, but they were never a real alternative to WWE.
No, especially at the beginning. It was an alternative, but it wasn't like an alternative for the performers in WWE to go to, right? Like all those guys that kind of flamed out in the early 2000s, the Chris Masters of the world, they were not going to go to Ring of Honor.
Yeah.
Because that promotion was built on, it's a lot of the guys that are now in WWE. But you're right. It was just two very different rosters where you're right. They weren't going to mix. At the time when Ring of Honor started, everyone's like, oh, these guys will probably never get signed by WWE.
Yeah.
Which is a great success story. It's actually one of the great that a lot of those guys got picked. But, and you could say the same for Jericho, too. It's a different promotion, though, in a cosmetic business. Maybe, I watched Royal Rumble 2017 today. He's a lot skinnier. I think. And I made the joke. Weren't we all? And then Justin said he's still, rocking the mediums or whatever. I said, my God.
Yes.
My God, man. I haven't worn a medium in a long time.
Oh.
But, this problem is getting worse because I watched the 2018 Rumble. By the way, I watched a lot of wrestling in preparation for this show. I've watched a lot of Rumble stuff. It had just 9 people that had debuted in 2011 or earlier. And one of them was John Cena, like the biggest star of the last 15 years. I just think that a lot of the people, if you go back and watch that particular Rumble, you're going to see a lot of people that are still around today, but they, God, seemed a lot more over back then. And the problem just is inexcusable to me, given the existence of NXT, which you should be getting fresh faces all the time. And we don't really see it. So I don't know. It seems like it's Bruce Pritchard, doesn't it? Doesn't this problem of bringing back older people seem like it's getting like...
I mean, they were doing it when he wasn't there, but I'm sure he adds to it for sure.
I don't know. So, I don't know. I think, just to provide a quick historical context, Vince McMahon will never forgive himself for letting Hogan, Savage, and Piper leave, quote, too early in the 90s. And they, all went and made the big money for WCW. When there was no competition in the early 2000s, kind of like Justin mentioned, he did give up on guys probably too early, right? It's actually very different. Like Chris Masters, man, that was like a good gimmick, or like a Rene Dupree. We talked about some of these guys in the 05 Rumble. Those guys were just like so green because there was no NXT. And like the indie scene was much different. So like those guys just came up and they were just being thrown on national television. Were way too green. Mm-hmm. And that should have been like the future for a while, but they all got cast aside because they, flamed out so early and they weren't ready. So, but now it seems the goal to be, you got AEW around, so they're going to hoard these people for as long as possible without allowing anyone to get too big. I think that's what it is,
Yeah.
I just say have some confidence in your booking instincts, Vince. There's really no Hogan, Savages, or Pipers on your roster. So roster turnover, fresh matchups. It's a good. I mean, look at Miro. I mean, is he like lighting the world on fire in AEW? Is that something Vince McMahon should be upset about?
No, in fact, I mean, to be critical of AEW, I'd say Miro's time there has been one of the big disappointments over the last few months, to be honest.
And just one last note on age, okay? Because that's where we started. Remember the Billionaire Ted sketches? Of course you do. Hulk Hogan was 42 when they did those sketches on him. Savage was 43. Piper was 41.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, I mean, that used to be the big thing. Like Vince,
not much older than us.
Yeah, Vince McMahon thought Randy Savage was done and wouldn't let him wrestle at WrestleMania 9.
So 93, so he would have been like 41, 40. Yeah, at that time.
He thought he was done at 40. There's no way. Now it's just like Carlito. You want another run? Okay. Carlito.
I mean, how old is AJ Styles right now? He is 43.
He's another guy you could put in that run. Like, he's had, again, world title runs as a babyface and a heel. And he should be like Rollins, getting, all right, hey, that hot new talent from NXT that's coming up, let's put him in with AJ Styles and put him over. But, you know, I kind of tease this a little bit. When you look at the NXT roster right now, who is like that next transcendent talent set to come up?
I don't know about transcendent. I think Cross could be pretty good when they bring him up, but I think he can make an immediate impact if they give him a chance.
My only concern is he requires a certain level of protection that they don't do on the main roster.
Yeah.
You know, they're not going to put him in short matches where he just kicks everyone's ass.
You know, it's not NXT per se, but the guy, and I think he's kind of said he's not interested, is Walter.
Yes, you're right. You're absolutely right. If you were to expand it to NXT, Walter is the most intriguing person that they have on either brand that could make it on the main roster. Because right now the main event scene at NXT, or the pseudo main event scene, you've got a lot of NXT lifers like Balor, Dunn, Gargano, Ciampa, Undisputed Era. They've all wrestled each other a lot, but they always kind of like have to be on takeovers, right? So that's also stunting the growth down there. Where are the other people at? Beyond those lifers? I mean, I don't. With I thought Matt Riddle and Keith Lee, I'll call him Matt Riddle, I don't give a damn, were like the last guys that I'm like, this guy could be a star if they do it right. And, you know, Riddle has some issues, and I don't know what Keith Lee's issue is, but like, I don't know, man. It's kind of scary that the amount of people they've, just not done a good job with coming up from NXT.
I'll do you another one on the age. So Hogan, when he came back in 2002 and won the world title, 48 years old. Spring of 2002. 48 years old. 6 years younger than Goldberg right now.
Yeah, and just, it's crazy too. And again, I'll be fair with AEW, with like guys being on television. Chris Jericho has switched promotions, but let's say you're someone who grew up on Chris Jericho like us. Chris Jericho, it was 23 years ago, like right around now, that he was really breaking out, right, with the Monday Night Jericho character.
Yep.
23-year gap. Only 12 years had elapsed from the birth of Hulkamania to the NWO turn. And that's Hulk Hogan. So, I mean, it's not, to be fair, I mean, this is an industry, and guys do take better care of themselves, like Justin, and they should have the one positive, or there's probably more than one, obviously, but one of the real positive, probably the biggest positive in modern wrestling is how much these guys are able to make over a sustained period, right? Like, I mean, these guys are getting paid pretty well in WWE. I mean, relative to their spots, a mid-card guy would not be making what mid-carders today make 15 years ago.
Yeah, Jericho's 50. To your point about Walter, I put that out on Twitter today on our @TopRopeNation Twitter account. I said, who do you want Drew McIntyre to work at WrestleMania? And somebody said Walter. And I immediately thought, never going to happen, but man, that would be a hell of a match. Drew McIntyre and Walter.
Drew McIntyre offered to work Walter at UK. So, I mean, so he would be interested.
That would be a great WrestleMania match.
Yeah, I don't think they'll do it. You're right. I mean, I don't know if maybe somebody can catch Vince on a good day and says, Vince, think of Bruno in the Garden. Picture Walter opposite Brand. Maybe that, I don't know, but it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Kind of springing this on you. So you haven't really had a chance to give it a lot of thought, but of the last 10 years, who do you think they missed the boat on the most of? There was a moment where it seemed like somebody could be something, but they didn't push them to the moon. They didn't strap the rocket pack on their back. So I'm just curious because one of my favorite Twitter follows is Trevor Dame, and he was kind of talking about this. And somebody had replied talking about like Cesaro, April of 2014, Ziggler, 2013, Strowman, kind of February and August of 2018. And then Finn Balor, when he came back from his injury, just went right back into the Intercontinental title race.
I think Cesaro is a good one because I mean there were so many Cesaro signs
that
every
WrestleMania.
week. And I think we talked about on the show, like our shows back in the summer of 2018, I think it was, maybe even 2017, that like that was the moment for Braun Strowman. That's when he was the most over. Yeah. Well, I think Cesaro is the one that really stands out for me. Like we
were coming out of that SummerSlam, and they gave us what we thought were WrestleMania main events with Reigns versus Cena, and they fed Strowman to Brock Lesnar.
Yeah.
But no, I agree with you. I mean, one of my favorite WrestleMania moments of all time is Cesaro, both because I love Cesaro and it was shocking and it felt like a moment, was Cesaro winning the Andre Battle Royal.
Yeah, by slamming the Big Show. They even did a nod to Andre Hogan with Cesaro. And it's the oddest thing. It just did not work with Paul Heyman, did it? I would have to like go back and watch the television to really evaluate what went wrong. But like it almost went sideways like immediately. Like they're thinking, oh, we'll give him hate because Vince I don't think is confident in Cesaro's mic ability, so he's like, we'll give him Heyman and this is going to be great. And that didn't work. And I would love to go back and kind of evaluate that to see what happened.
For a couple things. Number one, I don't think they ever really committed to that story or having Cesaro with. And I swear to God, this is part of it. Cesaro had one of the fucking worst entrance musics of all time.
Not as bad as American Alpha, but
yeah, I knew that was coming.
Had to get that in there.
And I'm just gonna say it. I love Cesaro, but he just out of the ring, he's got to be a pretty dull guy. I mean, he's been around for how long? And have we seen any Chronicle or 24 or anything with Cesaro ever?
Well, I think it would require. So those usually require sustained television pushes too. So who knows?
True.
I mean, I think it's funny because I think to answer your question, Justin, my answer might be a guy who actually did get a push, but it was the biggest script, and that was like Punk in 2011. That was like the one guy who felt like he actually could really jump it, and they just like screwed that up so bad. Coming off Money in the Bank. By bringing him back too early, having him lose to Triple H.
Yeesh.
I mean, he got a ton of Lapsed fans back too, and he's still one of the most talked about people in the industry. Yeah. So I think all the data would probably back that up.
It's just so hard because like I feel like, look, I said it earlier. I don't think there's any Hogan Savage Pipers on this roster. I don't think there's been in some time. But to me, it's so hard to say because these guys, they have the moment when they're hot, but they're not booked. And again, if I'm a wrestler and I heard some asshole podcast guy, I'd probably want to kick his ass. But wrestlers have shelf lives in a promotion. I just feel they do. Like most TV shows do not last 8 years, let alone TV characters.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, think of your favorite TV shows. I mean, did they last 8 seasons?
And the wrestlers are on more than the TV shows, right? They're only on for a few months out of the year, let alone every week of the year. Yeah.
So it's about like just having that, and we talk about this all the time on the show, the lack of investment in long-term booking. It used to be they'd get the guy, they'd do the introduction, they would know what his first big feud is, they start feeling things out, but they don't now, and so guys are just kind of, in that circle that we talked about, where it just, you're up a little bit, you're down a little bit, you're up a bit, you're down a little bit, and with the microwave, and that the microwave pushes when guys don't have the linear booking, it's about linear eyes, let's talk about linear booking, it's tough to believe in people. And like I said, we talked about it with the Owens Reigns matches, good a character work as they did. No one bought a title change.
Yeah.
There. And that's a problem when you have 2 titles like they do, 2 world titles, and people aren't buying title changes. That's not good.
Closing points on not Kyle, Justin's question. It's a little bit different because he did actually get the title, but I don't think that they really strapped the rocket to his back like they could have. Kofi Kingston. Look at that title win that he had and how everyone was so into it. It was a huge moment. Look at the WWE 24 they did on him or whatever the documentary was. Like his global appeal. he unceremoniously loses that title on the first SmackDown on Fox, and they never go back to it. And they never follow it up. And I mean, I guess post Daniel Bryan, he probably had the most, like the biggest rise of is that what you're gonna say, Kyle? Like he had the biggest rise spurred on by the fans of anybody that could have maybe been a big difference maker. They took the title off of him and nothing since. I mean, tag team, of course, New Day's great, but like he could have been a multi-time world champion, I think.
Kyle's about to erupt.
No, I'm so glad you mentioned it because I had a point on Kofi Kingston. Like I stopped adding to this like rambling pages of notes a while ago, but Kofi is like a fascinating thing to look at because it's almost as if that title run never happened. If you're to look at him in 2021,
that's an indictment.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
He just immediately went back to what he was. There was no effect on his, like, it was like, yeah, he was the champion, but he loses it and he's just right back to what he was before.
Yeah.
Okay, the announcers could say, oh, who could forget that wild ride of Kofi Kingston in 2019? But other than that, he's no different. It had no effect on Xavier Woods. It had no effect on Big E. It's like if you were in a coma during 2019, you would have no idea other than if, like the announcers mentioned, that Kofi Kingston was the champion. You would just assume you're like, oh my God, the New Day has just been like getting at this for 6-7 years now.
Yeah.
It's just like this like bizarre like several month period that happened and then it didn't. It used to be if a guy was like it would have a transformation on the people around him or him. He would become something different. But like, yeah, he went from world champ. He was tag team wrestler, world champ for 6 months, tag team wrestler. It's like if Bret Hart just went right back to the Hart Foundation in 1993.
Yeah.
And they just, never got any world title shots.
Yeah.
Speaking of, I watched the Razor Ramon match again.
Rumble 93?
Yeah. I've been sick today, man.
What'd you think?
It's good. And what's very interesting when you evaluate that compared to a lot of the other title matches is that there's a lot of title matches with terrible finishes at Royal Rumbles. Like that are like convoluted. It's just a very clean finish with the champion going over.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of a welcome departure in that regard. I have a trivia question for you guys. I teased this on the last show. We can close on this. There have only been 7 world title changes at Royal Rumbles ever, not including the 2 Rumbles where it changed hands, 92 and 2016. How many of those 7 can you name?
Rock from Punk. It's the first one that comes to mind.
That was actually one of the 2 I had to scramble for.
Cena from Styles.
Yep.
Michaels from Sid.
Yep. It's funny you guys named the more recent ones first.
Slaughter, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah. What's that, 4?
Yep.
Oh, let's see.
They're all pretty well spaced out.
Oh, well, no, never mind. I feel like a Triple H or Mick Foley one's got to be in there somewhere.
Rock from
Rock beat.
Rock from
Yeah.
Foley.
Yep.
Yep.
It's 99.
Yep.
You've got the 3 early ones and the 2 late ones. It's the 2 in the middle now.
Oh no.
One of the ones is the one that the last one I thought of.
So we're talking like mid 2000s here, mid to late.
Sure.
Yeah.
I don't know. Tell them to us.
Okay.
Too much dead air.
Yeah, sure. John Cena over Edge, 2006.
Never gotten that.
That was hot. After that one, Edge deserved longer. How fun! And that's the funny thing too. That's the funny thing.
Uh-oh, he froze.
He froze. Kyle's out. Oh no. Kyle, call back in. He's out.
Oh no. We're never gonna find out the other 2.
In 2006, I'm like, give Edge a fucking run. And that...
Oh,
Hello?
He's back.
Hello?
There he is.
He froze for a second.
Okay, there we
You're
go.
back. Okay.
Oh my God. Yeah, I know. I heard you guys and you guys had frozen. That was weird. So I was laughing at how funny is it that 2006, as a matter of fact, I was on a podcast saying this fucking Edge deserves a longer run. What are they doing to him? And little did I know 15 years later, I'm saying, I can't believe they brought this guy back. And then the last one, this one was hard actually, was Edge again in 2009 defeated Jeff Hardy, the famous Matt Hardy, after the burning of the trailer and the dead dog.
There it is.
Fine angle that was.
Nice. Very nice. Well, hey, always good to talk pro wrestling. Well, I look forward to Thursday nights each and every week. To have the trio back together was enjoyable.
Triple threat.
Yes, we'll be back next week, of course. And if you want more Top Rope Nation content, patreon.com/Top Rope Nation. Link in the description. There's more than 20 bonus podcasts available the minute you sign up right now that you've never heard before. They're only available on Patreon at full length, including the Royal Rumble 2005 retrospective we did last week, which was a hell of a show. So sign up for the Patreon, support the show, get your bonus content, join us once a month for a beer on our Zoom hangout, and join the book club. It's going to get started this month. Death to WCW should be a lot of fun. Again, all the details over on Patreon. So.
We should start whatting Ryan when he does those.
Go to the host spiel at the beginning and the end. You just distract.
What?
Well, you kind of do try to distract me. I usually try to not look at the video feed when I do it. Otherwise, I'm going to start laughing. Oh, well, hey, these guys are all a good follow on Twitter. Well, at least Kyle is. Justin's not on Twitter very often, but you can still follow him anyways. At Justin Joint. That's JOINT. Kyle at TRP Kyle. I am at Ryan Droste, DROSTE. The show is at Top Rope Nation. We're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Again, we referenced it many times during the show. The Facebook discussion group, Top Rope Nation Pro Wrestling Discussion. Join the group. Talk with us each and every day on there. So with that said, this has been episode 194 of Top Rope Nation. Hope you all have a good weekend. We'll talk to you next time.
Peace.